Hey guys, tonight we begin with something that sounds wonderfully simple. A peaceful medieval routine. Not a great battle. Not a dramatic execution. Not a king dramatically pointing at a map, while everyone around him pretends a plan makes sense. Instead, we're spending tonight following an ordinary day in medieval Europe. A day filled with church bells, smoky fireplaces, stiff wool clothing, suspiciously watered-down ale, and a surprising number of chickens wandering exactly where they should not be. So dim the lights. Get comfortable. Maybe pull a blanket over your shoulders. Let the modern world drift into background for a while, as we quietly step into a village where nobody has ever heard a phone notification, a traffic jam, or customer support. Life here isn't easy, but it is predictable. Mostly. As always, this isn't about making medieval life seem magical. It wasn't. It could be cold, muddy, uncomfortable, and endlessly repetitive. Yet there was also a rhythm to it that feels strangely calming from a distance. Every season had familiar work. Every bell had meaning. Every day looked remarkably similar to the one before. And honestly, after modern life, there's something oddly relaxing about that. So, let's quietly wander into the Middle Ages. Long before sunrise, the village is already awake. Well, not everyone. Most people are still buried beneath coarse wool blankets stuffed with straw mattresses that have seen considerably better centuries. The room is dark, very dark, without electricity. Dawn is less a suggestion and more of a command from nature itself. The house is small, perhaps only one room. If the family is fortunate, there might be a tiny loft overhead where older children sleep. If they're especially fortunate, there might even be a separate storage room. Luxury comes in surprisingly modest packages. The floor beneath everyone is packed earth. Sometimes reeds are scattered across it. Sometimes fresh herbs are mixed in to improve the smell. Sometimes they haven't been changed for a while. Let's simply say medieval noses had different expectations than ours. A fire from the previous evening still glows faintly in the center hearth. Smoke hangs near the ceiling. Actually, it hangs almost everywhere. Many houses have no chimney. Smoke simply finds its own way out through the roof, tiny cracks, or open doors. Apparently medieval architecture believed in giving smoke freedom of expression. Eyes water. Clothes permanently smell like fireplaces. Nobody really notices. When everything smells like smoke, nothing smells like smoke. Outside, the first rooster announces himself with absolute confidence. Whether he's actually announcing sunrise or simply enjoys hearing himself talk is another question entirely. Roosters possess remarkable confidence, considering they contribute very little beyond loud opinions and future soup. Soon another rooster answers. Then another. Within minutes, the entire countryside sounds like feathered alarm clocks arguing with one another. People begin moving, slowly, stretching, yawning, trying not to wake younger children too abruptly. There's no snooze button, only daylight. The mother rises first in many households. She quietly stirs the embers, adds fresh wood, blows carefully until orange flames return. This single fire is everything. It cooks meals, provides warmth, offers light, dries clothing, sometimes even houses sleeping cats. Without it, the home quickly becomes cold and uncomfortable. Keeping fire alive is almost a full-time responsibility. Children often help. One learns surprisingly early that accidentally letting the household fire die means someone now has to borrow flames from a neighbor. And while neighbors are usually kind, nobody enjoys beginning the morning by admitting they accidentally extinguished civilization. Breakfast is simple, often painfully simple. Yesterday's bread, pottage, perhaps some cheese, maybe onions. If fortune smiles, there might be eggs. If fortune smiles very broadly, perhaps a little bacon. Not much, just enough to remind everyone pigs exist. Bread is everywhere. Dark bread, dense bread, heavy bread, bread capable of surviving minor military campaigns. Modern artisan bakers might proudly call it rustic. Medieval villagers simply called it breakfast. Pottage deserves special appreciation. It is less a recipe and more a lifestyle. Whatever vegetables happen to exist, into the pot. Some grains, into the pot. A little meat, into the pot. Yesterday's leftovers? Believe it or not, into the pot. The same pot may simmer day after day with fresh ingredients continually added. It's basically the original endless soup. Food historians politely describe this as efficient. Others might describe it as culinary optimism. Still, it keeps people alive. And that's really the point. Water isn't always trusted. Streams become contaminated. Wells sometimes disappoint. So even children occasionally drink weak ale. Before anyone panics. Medieval small beer contains very little alcohol. Think less lively tavern. More slightly enthusiastic breadwater. Brewing often makes liquid safer than untreated water. History has many unexpected solutions. Some are stranger than others. Once breakfast finishes, work begins immediately. There are no weekends, no paid vacation, no retirement plans. Nature has created an extremely demanding schedule, and everyone follows it. The fields wait patiently, which is precisely the problem. They're always waiting. Spring demands planting. Summer demands maintenance. Autumn demands harvesting. Winter demands repairing absolutely everything that broke during the other seasons. Even resting somehow becomes work. Men gather tools, wooden plows, iron blades, axes, ropes. Everything is valuable. Nothing is wasted. A broken handle receives another handle. A worn blade gets sharpened again, then sharpened once more. Eventually, the tool becomes almost entirely replacement parts. Centuries before philosophers wondered about the ship of Theseus, farmers probably looked at old shovels and quietly thought, am I still using the same shovel? Women begin equally demanding tasks. Bread must be baked, water carried, clothing repaired, children watched, milk processed, vegetables gathered, wool spun, soap prepared, candles made, beer brewed, animals fed. The workload is astonishing. Modern historians sometimes remind us that domestic labor occupied nearly every waking hour. They're not exaggerating. Running a medieval household resembles operating a tiny survival factory. Children aren't exempt. Quite the opposite. By 7 or 8 years old, many already contribute meaningfully. Collecting eggs, watching geese, scaring birds from crops, fetching water, gathering firewood, helping younger siblings. Childhood exists, but it looks rather different. Toys appear occasionally. Simple carved animals, wooden spinning tops, homemade dolls. Games happen during brief moments between responsibilities. Free time isn't scheduled. It simply appears when work briefly relaxes. Let's quietly wander into fields. Morning mist still clings to the grass. Oxen move steadily. Their pace suggests creatures who have absolutely no intention of rushing for anyone, ever. A farmer guides a plow, slowly, patiently, one straight furrow after another. It takes remarkable endurance. The soil isn't always cooperative. Neither are the animals. Weather constantly threatens every plan. Too much rain, not enough rain, unexpected frost. Storms arriving precisely when least appreciated. Agriculture is essentially an endless negotiation with nature. Nature rarely compromises. Birds circle overhead. Larks sing. Crows observe everything with unmistakable judgment. Crows somehow always appear to know more than everyone else. Perhaps they do. Nearby, women weed gardens filled with cabbage, onions, beans, peas, and herbs. Nothing decorative. Almost everything must serve a purpose. Flowers are lovely. Turnips are lunch. Practicality usually wins. Around mid-morning, church bells echo across the countryside. The sound carries surprisingly far. These bells organize time. Not clocks, not watches, bells. They announce prayers, warn about danger, celebrate weddings, mourn funerals, mark festivals, signal meetings. If something important happens, chances are a bell has opinions about it. Religion quietly shapes every hour, not always dramatically, simply constantly. Crosses hang inside homes. Saints appear in conversation. Holy days interrupt routines. People pray before eating, before sleeping, before traveling, before difficult work. Faith isn't an occasional activity. It's woven through daily life almost invisibly. The local priest knows nearly everyone. He baptizes babies, blesses marriages, buries grandparents, hears confessions, sometimes settles disputes, sometimes creates new ones. He is respected, occasionally criticized, very human. In other words, not every priest is especially scholarly. Some are excellent readers. Others memorize enough Latin to perform services confidently while hoping nobody asks complicated theological questions. Fortunately, most villagers aren't eager for debates about advanced doctrine before lunch. Life is busy enough. Speaking of lunch, it arrives modestly. Bread again, cheese, perhaps beans, maybe cold pottage carried from home. Nobody expects elaborate meals while working fields. Calories matter more than presentation. There are no decorative parsley sprigs, no tiny artistic sauce drizzles. The chef's recommendation is food. After eating, people sit briefly beneath trees. Conversations drift gently. Weather, harvests, neighbors, marriage plans, prices at the nearest market, someone's stubborn donkey. Some subjects never become outdated. A traveling merchant occasionally passes through. Now excitement quietly enters the village. Not loud excitement, medieval excitement, which involves politely gathering around someone carrying unusual objects. He brings salt, needles, bright cloth, iron tools, tiny mirrors, perhaps spices, so expensive people mainly enjoy smelling them. News travels with merchants. Stories from distant towns, rumors about kings, whispers of wars, impossible tales involving dragons almost certainly spotted by someone's cousin's remarkably trustworthy neighbor. People listen carefully. Information is precious, entertainment even more so. The merchant probably exaggerates. Just a little, or quite a lot. Occupational hazard. Really. Still, his stories briefly expand the world beyond familiar fields. The afternoon stretches onward. Work resumes. Nobody particularly complains. Complaining rarely changes crops. Instead, conversations continue quietly while hands remain busy. This rhythm defines medieval existence. Work, pause, work again, season after season, year after year, generations repeating familiar patterns. And somehow, within that repetition, people build entire lives. Homes, families, friendships, small joys, tiny celebrations, moments worth remembering. Because history isn't only made by kings. Sometimes history is simply a woman baking bread while talking to her daughter, or a father teaching his son how deeply seeds should be planted, or neighbors helping repair a damaged roof before winter arrives. Those moments rarely appear in grand chronicles, yet they filled almost every day of almost every human life. As the afternoon slowly softens toward evening, shadows lengthen across the fields. The pace eases just a little, not because the work is finished. It almost never is, but because daylight has begun quietly reminding everyone that another day is gently coming to its close. The afternoon slowly leans into evening. There is no dramatic sunset soundtrack, no cinematic golden light pouring perfectly across the countryside. Real medieval evenings are quieter than that. Clouds drift wherever they please. A cool breeze moves through the wheat. The oxen look relieved that nobody is asking them to pull one more furrow. Honestly, they have probably been silently judging human work habits all day. The farmers begin gathering their tools. Every wooden handle is checked. Every iron blade is wiped clean if possible. Iron is expensive. A neglected tool is more than an inconvenience. It represents weeks of labor that cannot easily be replaced. Nothing is casually abandoned. Even broken rope might someday become useful. One of the easiest ways to recognize a medieval household would be the complete inability to throw anything away. Modern people have junk drawers. Medieval people had entire lives built around the phrase, "We might need this later." And surprisingly often, they actually did. The village path gradually fills with familiar faces. Nobody rushes. There is very little point. The daylight lasts exactly as long as nature allows. Walking faster does not persuade the sun to remain overhead. Children arrive carrying bundles of sticks nearly as large as themselves. Some proudly hold baskets with eggs collected during the afternoon. Others carefully herd stubborn geese toward home. Geese deserve a brief mention. Modern people sometimes think of them as slightly aggressive park decorations. Medieval villagers knew better. A goose is essentially a feathered security guard with absolutely no respect for personal space. They hiss. They bite. They scream at strangers. In many villages, they probably frighten thieves more effectively than some guards. Every family knows exactly which goose belongs to which neighbor, mostly because every goose has developed a unique personality, usually unpleasant. Still, they lay eggs. Their feathers become pillows. Their meat becomes dinner on special occasions. So everyone politely tolerates their dramatic behavior. The sheep wander more peacefully. Small bells around their necks softly clink. With every step, the shepherd counts them again, and then probably counts them one more time. Sheep possess an almost magical talent for becoming temporarily invisible behind the one bush large enough to hide exactly one sheep. Goats are even more creative. Goats wake up every morning asking themselves, "What rule can I completely ignore today?" The answer is usually, all of them. Eventually, everyone reaches home. Smoke already rises from dozens of rooftops. The village begins smelling pleasantly familiar, with smoke, fresh bread, boiling vegetables, a hint of animals, a generous amount of damp earth. It is not the scented candle version of history. It is simply everyday life. Inside each cottage, the fire receives fresh fuel. Children help pump the bellows. Tiny sparks dance upward. The room slowly fills with warm orange light. There are no electric lamps waiting to brighten dark corners. Fire creates shadows. Soft ones. Moving ones. The walls almost seem alive. It is easy to imagine stories beginning beside a fireplace. Perhaps that is exactly why so many did. Dinner resembles breakfast, only warmer. The great family pot returns once again. Pottage has patiently waited over fire for much of the day. Now new vegetables are added, perhaps cabbage, maybe leeks, sometimes peas. If someone trapped a rabbit, everyone celebrates quietly. Rabbit is not a feast fit for kings. But after weeks of mostly vegetables and grain, it feels wonderfully luxurious. If a pig was recently slaughtered, a tiny amount of preserved pork might flavor the entire meal. Notice the wording. Flavor, not dominate. Meat remains expensive for ordinary people. Many modern dinner plates would look astonishingly extravagant beside an average medieval supper. Bread returns once more. Of course it does. Bread appears with the determination of a recurring television character. Sometimes dark rye, sometimes barley, sometimes oats. Wheat bread is often reserved for wealthier households. White bread is admired. Dark bread is reality. Nobody complains very much. Well, they probably complain occasionally. Complaining about bread appears to be one of humanity's oldest traditions. Around the table, or perhaps simply sitting on benches, everyone eats from wooden bowls. Some families share dishes. Spoons are common. Knives exist. Forks? Not yet. Regular guests in much of medieval Europe. Hands remain perfectly respectable dining utensils. Conversation quietly fills a room. Children describe something interesting they found. A bird's nest, an unusual stone, a fox spotted near the woods. Adults discuss tomorrow's work, how much seed remains, whether rain might arrive, whether the landlord plans another visit. Someone wonders if the miller is charging too much grain again. The miller develops a rather complicated reputation across medieval Europe. He provides an essential service, grinding grain into flour. Without him, bread becomes difficult, very difficult. Yet villagers often suspect the miller keeps slightly more flour than he honestly deserves. Whether this happens every time is another matter. But history records enough complaints to suggest the profession inspired a healthy amount of skepticism. The blacksmith enjoys a somewhat different reputation. Everyone needs him. Axes break. Horses require shoes. Plowshares wear down. Locks fail. Nails disappear into mysterious alternate dimensions. The blacksmith somehow solves all of this with fire, iron, and remarkable upper body strength. His workshop rings throughout the village. Clang, clang, clang. Each strike echoes like a heartbeat. Children often watched from a respectful distance. To them, the forge must seem almost magical. Cold metal enters. Useful tools emerge. Not quite magic, but certainly close enough. After dinner, household work continues. The day is far from over. Women spin while using drop spindles. The movement becomes almost hypnotic. Twist, pull, twist again. Long threads gradually appear. Hours pass almost unnoticed. Later these threads become cloth. Cloth becomes clothing. Every shirt, cloak, blanket, and it begins here. Making one complete outfit requires astonishing patience. Modern wardrobes would probably appear miraculous. Imagine opening a closet containing 50 shirts. A medieval spinner might politely faint. Clothing represents months of labor. Every stitch matters. Every patch extends another season of usefulness. Children learn sewing remarkably early, not because embroidery is fashionable, because holes appear constantly. Life is rough on fabric, very rough. Nearby, someone repairs a wooden bucket. Another sharpens a knife. Someone else braids rope. The elderly contribute whenever they can, perhaps shelling peas, telling stories, watching toddlers attempt increasingly ambitious adventures involving furniture. Grandparents quietly preserve memory. They remember harsh winters, good harvests, bad harvests, old feuds, long-forgotten songs. Entire generations carry history inside conversations rather than books. Books themselves remain astonishingly rare. A single handwritten manuscript represents months, sometimes years, of careful work. Monks copy each page by hand, every letter, every decoration, every illustration. Mistakes are scraped away carefully, then rewritten. Printing presses still belong centuries in the future. For ordinary villagers, books might as well be treasure. Instead, stories travel by voice. The old woman remembers a tale. She tells her daughter. The daughter tells her son. The son eventually tells his grandchildren. History walks from one generation to the next without ever touching paper. Outside, evening deepens. The sky slowly fills with stars. Real stars. Thousands of them. Without city lights, the heavens become astonishingly bright. The Milky Way stretches overhead like pale smoke across black velvet. Many medieval people have never traveled more than 20 miles from where they were born. Yet every night, they look into a universe unimaginably vast. That thought feels strangely comforting. The stars belong equally to kings, peasants, merchants, and shepherds. Nobody owns the sky. Owls begin calling from nearby woods. Some villagers smile. Others quietly cross themselves. Owls collect a generous amount of folklore. Depending on where you live, they might symbolize wisdom, or misfortune, or mysterious visitors. History enjoys assigning birds remarkably complicated careers. Dogs settle beside the doorway. Cats begin their nightly patrol. Cats serve a practical purpose. Grain attracts mice. Mice attract cats. Everyone appreciates this arrangement, except perhaps the mice. Medieval cats receive considerably less affection than many modern pets, yet they still find warm fireplaces, friendly hands, and occasional scraps of fish. Some things never change. As darkness settles completely, candles become precious. Wax is expensive. Tallow candles smoke. Either way, light is carefully rationed. Nobody wastes it. Most families simply go to bed relatively early, not because they are exceptionally disciplined, because remaining awake in darkness accomplishes very little. Sleep itself arrives differently than many people imagine. Historians increasingly believe medieval Europeans often experienced what is called segmented sleep. They slept for several hours, woke naturally during the middle of the night, prayed, talked quietly, checked the fire, perhaps completed a little work, then returned to sleep until dawn. Nobody considered this unusual. Modern insomnia may simply have confused expectations after electric lighting transformed human routines. Sometimes history quietly reminds us that our normal is often surprisingly recent. The village itself grows almost silent. Almost. Somewhere, a baby cries. A cow complains. A distant dog answers another distant dog. Wind brushes against wooden shutters. Rain might begin tapping gently on thatched roofs. Inside every little cottage, families drift into sleep. Tomorrow will resemble today. Not exactly, but closely enough. The same fields, the same bells, the same bread, the same conversations, the same hopes that this year's harvest will be just a little better than the last. It would be easy to think such a life was unbearably repetitive. Yet within that repetition existed birthdays, friendships, courtships, laughter, small victories, shared meals, and quiet moments beside warm fires. Most people in history never became famous. No castles carried their names. No portrait survived. No royal chronicler recorded their opinions. And yet, they built the roads, harvested the grain, raised the children, maintained the villages, repaired the churches, spun the wool, baked the bread. Their ordinary days quietly supported the extraordinary history we usually read about. Kings could argue over crowns because someone else was harvesting wheat. Knights could ride across kingdoms because someone else was shoeing horses. Monasteries could preserve knowledge because someone else was growing barley. The Middle Ages were never only castles and battles. Most of the time, they sounded exactly like this. A crackling fire, a spinning wheel, a sleepy rooster already preparing tomorrow's unnecessary enthusiasm. And beneath a sky filled with stars untouched by electric light, another peaceful medieval day gently came to an end. A few peaceful days pass. The same rhythm continues. The same rooster confidently announces another sunrise, as though he personally invented mornings. The same smoke curls from cottage roofs. The same bread appears at breakfast. The same pottage quietly continues its long and distinguished career. Life in the village rarely changes very much. And then market day arrives. For medieval villagers, this is about as exciting as life gets without someone accidentally becoming king. There are no amusement parks, no shopping malls, no streaming services asking if you're still watching. Market day is entertainment, social gathering, business meeting, neighborhood gossip session, and supply run all wrapped into one wonderfully noisy afternoon. People begin preparing before dawn. Families gather baskets. Eggs are wrapped carefully in straw. Cheese is packed into cloth. Bundles of wool are tied with rope. A few chickens protest loudly about being included in today's plans. The chickens have valid concerns. Markets rarely improve a chicken's long-term prospects. The roads leading toward town slowly fill with travelers. Some walk alone. Some travel as families. Some join neighbors for company. It's safer that way. Besides, long walks become much shorter when someone has an interesting story, or at least an interesting rumor. Rumors, after all, are one of medieval Europe's fastest forms of communication. Somehow everyone knows that Lord Geoffrey argued with his brother. Someone heard the abbot bought a particularly expensive horse. Someone else insists a merchant from Italy has arrived carrying cloth so smooth it feels almost magical. Nobody is entirely sure which stories are true. That has never stopped anyone from telling them. The journey itself is peaceful. Morning mist hangs over open fields. Bird song fills the hedgerows. Wildflowers bloom along narrow dirt roads. A rabbit darts across the path. Children point excitedly. Adults barely notice. They have seen approximately 12,000 rabbits during their lives. The novelty has faded just a little. As the village disappears behind them, the church bell becomes quieter. Another church bell somewhere ahead begins to answer. Across medieval Europe, bells create an invisible network. You may not see the next village, but sometimes you can hear it. Eventually the road widens. More travelers appear. A monk walks steadily with a leather satchel slung over one shoulder. Two merchants argue politely over the price of wool. A blacksmith guides a sturdy horse, pulling a cart full of newly forged tools. A shepherd carefully convinces several sheep that yes, they really are walking in the correct direction. The sheep remain unconvinced. They usually are. By late morning, the market town finally comes into view. Compared to the quiet farming village, it feels enormous, not by modern standards, Perhaps only a few thousand people. Sometimes far fewer. But to someone who spends most days surrounded by fields, it seems wonderfully busy. Stone buildings replace many wooden cottages. The streets become narrower. Voices echo between walls. Smoke rises from dozens of chimneys. Church towers stand proudly above rooftops. The marketplace itself is already alive. Wooden stalls line the square. Bright pieces of cloth flutter gently in the breeze. Fresh bread perfumes the air. Someone nearby is roasting meat. Another vendor is selling onions. Together, the smells create a combination that could only be described as authentically medieval. Pleasant in some places, questionable in others. People crowd every corner. Farmers, merchants, craftsmen, pilgrims, travelers. Children weaving effortlessly through gaps that adults cannot possibly fit through. Dogs happily search for dropped scraps. Cats quietly observe from sunny windowsills with the calm confidence of creatures who believe humans exist primarily to provide mice. The sound is constant, not loud enough to overwhelm, just wonderfully busy. People bargain. Coins clink. Cartwheels creak. A donkey loudly announces opinions nobody requested. Someone laughs. Someone sneezes. Somewhere nearby, a baby begins crying in perfect harmony with the donkey. History rarely records these little sounds, yet they form the background music of everyday life. Let's take a slow walk through the stalls. The baker's table attracts a steady crowd. Fresh loaves are stacked neatly. Dark rye bread. Round barley loaves. Occasionally white wheat bread for those fortunate enough to afford it. The smell alone draws people closer. Fresh bread has possessed this remarkable power for thousands of years. Some traditions deserve their longevity. Nearby, the cheesemaker proudly displays wheels of cheese in various sizes. Some are soft. Some are hard enough to survive several generations. Perhaps that's slightly unfair. Only slightly. Cheese was practical. It lasted longer than milk. It traveled well. It made simple meals considerably more satisfying. One merchant displays colorful cloth imported from surprisingly distant places. Deep blues, rich reds, warm greens, bright yellow. To modern eyes, fabric may seem ordinary. To medieval villagers, brightly dyed cloth represents wealth, craftsmanship, and a tiny glimpse of the wider world. Imagine spending most of your life wearing undyed wool, then suddenly seeing brilliant scarlet imported from hundreds of miles away. It would feel almost magical. Children gather around another stall. Wooden toys, tiny carved horses, whistles shaped like birds, simple spinning tops. Nothing complicated, nothing battery-powered. Remarkably, they still produce exactly the same delighted smiles children have always worn. Human nature changes more slowly than technology. The blacksmith's corner rings with familiar sounds. Fresh horseshoes, knives, nails, locks, cooking pots, iron hinges. Everything useful, everything sturdy, nothing decorative without purpose. A farmer carefully examines a new plow blade. He turns it over thoughtfully, asks questions, negotiates the price, walks away, returns 5 minutes later, negotiates again. Some shopping habits have apparently remained unchanged for centuries. Further along sits the potter. Rows of clay bowls catch the sunlight. Pitchers, storage jars, cooking pots, simple shapes, beautiful in their usefulness. One accidental slip during firing can ruin days of work. The potter knows this. Every successful piece represents patience as much as skill. Then there are the spice merchants. Now, these are especially fascinating. Tiny sacks hold pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, small amounts, very small amounts. Each spice has traveled astonishing distances, across deserts, across oceans, across kingdoms, handled by countless merchants before finally arriving in this modest English, French, German, or Italian market. Global trade existed long before globalization became a fashionable phrase. It simply moved at the speed of horses and ships instead of airplanes. Most villagers never buy much, perhaps only enough pepper for an important celebration. Still, they stop to smell it. That alone is worth a visit. Nearby, an elderly storyteller has quietly gathered an audience. No stage, no microphone, just a good voice. Children sit cross-legged near the front. Adults pretend they are merely passing by while secretly listening as well. He tells stories of Charlemagne, King Arthur, saints, giants, dragons, perhaps all within the same afternoon. History and legend politely blur together. Nobody seems particularly bothered. After all, a good story is still a good story. Musicians arrive too. A simple fiddle, a small harp, a pipe, a drum. Nothing grand. Just cheerful melodies drifting gently above the crowd. People smile without even realizing it. Music has that habit. It quietly improves ordinary moments. One of the busiest places is the tavern. Not because everyone is becoming wildly drunk. Quite the opposite. The tavern functions almost like the village living room. Travelers exchange news. Merchants make agreements. Farmers rest tired feet. Ale is poured. Bread is shared. Stew bubbles quietly over the fire. Conversations weave together until nobody remembers exactly how they began. A traveler from another kingdom attracts immediate attention. His accent sounds unusual. His clothes are cut differently. Even his boots seem interesting. He speaks of mountains, large cities, busy ports, ships bigger than entire village churches. People listen carefully. The world suddenly feels much larger than yesterday. Some stories become slightly exaggerated during retelling, entirely understandable. By the third village, a merchant who merely crossed one difficult river has somehow survived 14 pirate attacks and negotiated personally with an emperor. Memory occasionally enjoys improving a perfectly ordinary afternoon. Meanwhile, local officials quietly watch over the marketplace. Weights are inspected, measures checked, taxes collected. Nobody particularly enjoys taxes. This, too, appears to be one of history's oldest traditions. The town crier occasionally steps into the square. He unfolds a parchment, clears his throat with theatrical importance, then reads official announcements. Perhaps the king has issued a new decree. Perhaps a bridge requires repair. Perhaps the next fair has been scheduled. For a few moments, everyone listens, even if the news changes very little about tomorrow's chores, because information is valuable, especially when it arrives from beyond the horizon. As the afternoon drifts onward, purchases are carefully packed away. A new cooking pot, a bundle of salt, fresh thread, perhaps a ribbon for a daughter, a small wooden toy for a son who behaved remarkably well, or perhaps simply because childhood deserves occasional surprises. The market slowly begins to empty. Stalls disappear one by one. Merchants load wagons. Animals are gathered. Coins are counted. Promises are made to meet again next month. People begin the familiar walk home. Baskets feel heavier. Purses feel lighter. Minds feel fuller. They carry not only supplies, but stories, news, songs, rumors, new ideas. The market has quietly connected dozens of little communities into something larger. Without newspapers, without radio, without the internet, this is how information travels. One conversation at a time. As the evening sun paints the field with soft gold, the familiar village finally comes into view once again. The smoke still rises from its cottages. The church bell still marks the passing hours. The rooster is probably preparing tomorrow's unnecessary speech. And life gently settles back into its comforting rhythm, because tomorrow the fields will once again be waiting. And medieval routine, like the turning of the seasons, never really stops. The market has come and gone. The villagers have returned to their familiar rhythm. The bread has once again become slightly harder than anyone would prefer. The pottage continues its seemingly eternal existence. The rooster remains deeply committed to his career. Life settles back into its peaceful pattern. But tonight, let's slowly wander somewhere a little different. Not too far away. Perhaps only a day's walk across rolling fields. Rising above the surrounding countryside sits a medieval castle. From a distance, it looks almost timeless. Gray stone walls, tall towers, a heavy gate, flags moving gently in the wind. To modern eyes, castles often appear romantic, beautiful, majestic. The sort of place where everyone probably enjoyed dramatic balcony speeches and elegant candlelit dinners. Reality, as usual, was considerably more practical. A castle was first and foremost a machine for survival. It happened to contain a family. Think less luxury hotel. More very expensive fortress that occasionally hosted dinner. As we approach, the first thing we notice is the sound. Not silence, never silence. Stone echoes everything. Blacksmiths hammer horseshoes. Servants carry buckets across uneven courtyards. Dogs bark enthusiastically at absolutely nothing. Stable boys shout to one another. Somewhere, a goose has wandered into a place it absolutely should not be. The goose appears entirely unconcerned. It usually is. The outer walls rise high above us. Building them required astonishing effort. Thousands upon thousands of stones. Years of labor. Entire communities of masons, carpenters, quarry workers, and craftsmen. A castle was not something someone casually decided to build over a long weekend. It represented wealth on a truly staggering scale. Even maintaining one demanded constant attention. Stone cracks, wood rots, roofs leak, iron rusts. Nothing lasts forever, especially in the famously enthusiastic European weather. The drawbridge is lowered today. No danger threatens. Merchants arrive regularly. Messengers ride in. Peasants bring rents or supplies. Life continues. Guards stand beside the entrance. Contrary to many movies, they spend surprisingly little time dramatically crossing spears in front of visitors. Most of their day consists of watching people, checking wagons, recognizing familiar faces, trying very hard not to fall asleep during the quieter hours. Being a medieval guard involved far more standing than glorious sword fighting. Inside the gatehouse, the air immediately changes. The thick stone walls keep everything noticeably cooler, even during summer. In winter, however, that coolness becomes a rather determined form of cold. Stone remembers winter remarkably well. The central courtyard spread before us. It feels almost like a tiny village enclosed within protective walls. Servants hurry between buildings. Horses stamp impatiently in the stables. Barrels are rolled toward storage rooms, which is stacked neatly beside kitchens. Life here is busy from sunrise until long after sunset. Every person has a task. Actually, many tasks. A castle requires cooks, bakers, brewers, blacksmiths, stable hands, laundry workers, gardeners, messengers, guards, carpenters, chaplains, stewards, falconers, hunters, nurses, and dozens of other specialists. The noble family living here may receive the attention in history books, but they represent only a tiny fraction of the castle's population. Most people here are workers. Without them, the castle simply stops functioning. Let's quietly enter the Great Hall. This is the heart of the castle. The room is impressive, not because it is extravagantly decorated, although some certainly are, but because of its sheer size. Massive wooden beams stretch across the ceiling. Long tables fill the floor. A great fireplace dominates one wall. Light enters through narrow windows. Colorful tapestries hang from stone walls. These tapestries serve two purposes. They display wealth, and perhaps even more importantly, they help keep rooms warm. Stone walls are beautiful. They're also remarkably talented at stealing body heat. Even kings appreciated insulation. Rushes cover much of the floor. Fresh herbs are sometimes scattered among them. Lavender, mint, chamomile. The pleasant scent helps soften the less pleasant realities of medieval living. People did care about cleanliness. They simply possessed fewer effective tools for achieving it. At the far end of the hall sits a high table. This is where the Lord and his family eat. Not because they dislike everyone else. Well, occasionally perhaps. But mainly because medieval society places enormous importance on rank. Where you sit tells everyone exactly who you are. Status becomes visible before anyone even begins speaking. Below the high table stretch long benches for knights, guests, officials, and important servants. Further down, others take their places. The seating arrangement resembles a carefully organized map of medieval society. Nobody accidentally sits in the wrong place. That would create an awkward evening. And medieval people, despite popular stereotypes, generally preferred avoiding unnecessary awkwardness. The kitchens nearby are astonishingly busy. Heat pours from enormous fireplaces. Large cauldrons bubble steadily. Bread bakes inside stone ovens. The smell is wonderful. Roasting meat, fresh herbs, warm bread, onions gently softening in pots. After following peasant meals for several days, the castle menu certainly appears more generous. Venison, beef, pork, fresh fish when available, pies filled with meat or vegetables, cheeses from surrounding farms, fruit preserved with honey. Not every meal resembles a royal feast. Even nobles eat fairly ordinary food much of the time, but ordinary for them still exceeds what most villagers experience. The castle cook manages an extraordinary operation. Imagine preparing meals for 100 people using only open fires, without thermometers, without refrigerators, without electric mixers, without timers. Experience becomes everything. Recipes live inside memory, not measuring cups. The head cook probably deserves considerably more historical appreciation than he or she usually receives. Nearby, the pantry is carefully organized. Sacks of grain, barrels of ale, casks of wine, salted meat, smoked fish, beans, oats, honey. Everything must last through winter. Planning food supplies becomes almost an art form. Running out is not an acceptable option. The castle cellar feels wonderfully cool, perfect for storing wine, beer, cheese, and other valuable supplies. Candles flicker softly against ancient stone. The smell changes again. Cool earth, wood, a faint sweetness from stored apples. Silence settles comfortably underground. Back upstairs, we find the castle chapel, smaller than the village church. Quieter, too. Colored light filters gently through stained glass. A priest quietly prepares for the next service. Religion remains woven through every aspect of noble life, just as surely as village life. The Lord prays. The servants pray. The children pray. Victories, failures, births, deaths, journeys, harvests. Everything passes through the language of faith. Let's wander toward the private chambers. Now things become unexpectedly smaller. Many people imagine castles filled with enormous luxurious bedrooms. In reality, private rooms are surprisingly limited. Privacy itself is something of a luxury. The lord and lady enjoy separate chambers in many castles. Children often sleep nearby. Servants remain close enough to assist when needed. Curtains surround beds not merely for decoration, but for warmth. A bed with heavy curtains traps precious heat during freezing nights. The mattresses are stuffed with feathers if the family is wealthy, straw if less fortunate. Either way, medieval people would probably find our modern memory foam mattresses astonishingly magical, although they might remain suspicious until someone explained why the bed slowly returned to its original shape. One can imagine conversation. Is the mattress alive? Reasonable question. Honestly, clothing is stored in side-carved wooden chests. There are no built-in closets, no walk-in wardrobes. Each garment represents months of labor. Fine wool, linen, silk for the wealthiest, fur for winter. Everything is repaired repeatedly. Even wealthy nobles understand the value of careful maintenance. Fast fashion would seem utterly incomprehensible. The lady of the castle spends surprisingly little time dramatically gazing from towers. Instead, she oversees an astonishing amount of administration, household accounts, food stores, servants, guests, medical care, education for children, textile production, charitable giving, estate management during her husband's absence. Running a medieval noble household resembles managing a medium-sized business. History sometimes overlooks just how capable many noble women needed to become. Meanwhile, the Lord's responsibilities rarely resemble endless tournaments. He settles disputes, reviews finances, inspects fields, meets tenants, reads correspondence, plans repairs, negotiates marriages, welcomes visitors, holds court, signs documents, occasionally hunts, occasionally fights, but far more often, He attends meetings. Even medieval aristocracy could not entirely escape paperwork. Well, parchment work. Clothes enough. Children race through corridors whenever adults aren't watching. Wooden swords appear. Imaginary dragons are bravely defeated. Dogs enthusiastically join games they barely understand. Nurses eventually restore order for approximately 6 minutes. Childhood remains childhood, whether inside cottages or castles. As evening approaches, candles are lit one by one. The great hall fills once again. Tonight's supper begins with prayer. Conversation follows. Travelers share news. Musicians quietly play. A harp, perhaps a flute. Soft melodies drift upward toward dark wooden beams. No one hurries. Without electric lights, the evening naturally slows. Outside the castle walls, the surrounding countryside grows quiet. Farmhouses glow faintly from distant hearth fires. The same stars shine above noble towers and humble cottages alike. That is perhaps one of history's gentlest reminders. Stone walls may separate rich from poor. Titles may divide lord from laborer. But the moon rises for everyone. Tomorrow, the Lord will wake to meetings, the cook to kitchens, the blacksmith to iron, the stable boy to impatient horses, the lady to household accounts, the guards to another long day watching the gate, and somewhere beyond the castle walls, the village rooster will once again declare himself the undisputed ruler of the morning, with absolutely no evidence to support the claim, and somehow the entire medieval world will quietly begin another peaceful day. Morning arrives once again, not with fanfare, not with dramatic orchestral music, just a gentle gray light of dawn slowly finding its way across fields, forests, and old stone walls. The rooster has already completed his daily announcement. The village is beginning another familiar routine. The castle servants are lighting fires. The blacksmith is probably wondering which tool will need repairing first. And somewhere, tucked away beyond a winding woodland path, another community has already been awake for quite some time. Let's quietly wander there. Today, we are visiting a medieval monastery. If castles were centers of power, and villages were centers of survival, then monasteries were places built around time itself. Everything happened according to the clock. Well, not exactly a clock. More accurately, according to bells. The monastery appears gradually through the morning mist. Tall stone walls surround a peaceful collection of buildings. Unlike a castle, the walls are not meant to intimidate. They simply separate one kind of life from another. Outside lies the ordinary world. Inside lies a rhythm almost entirely devoted to prayer, study, and work. The gate stands open. A traveler approaches quietly. Perhaps a pilgrim. Perhaps a poor family asking for food. Perhaps a messenger carrying letters from another abbey. Monasteries rarely shut themselves away completely. Hospitality is one of their duties. A weary traveler could often expect a warm meal, a simple bed, and someone willing to listen to the story of a long journey. Considering medieval roads, that kindness probably felt miraculous. The porter greets visitors politely. He knows nearly everyone from the surrounding countryside. His job requires patience. Every stranger must be welcomed, every delivery checked, every question answered. It is not particularly glamorous. But then, very few medieval jobs are. The monastery courtyard feels remarkably peaceful. Birdsong echoes between stone buildings. Fruit trees grow carefully along one wall. Small gardens overflow with herbs. A cat naps in a patch of sunlight with the confidence of a creature who has successfully avoided responsibility for several thousand years. Cats have mastered consistency. The buildings are simple, strong, practical. Nothing here exists merely to impress visitors. Beauty certainly matters, but usefulness matters just as much. The church dominates everything else. Its tall windows catch the morning light. Inside, candles burn quietly. The air carries a gentle scent of beeswax and incense. Monks have already gathered for prayer. In fact, they have gathered several times already. The daily schedule begins astonishingly early, long before sunrise. The first bell sounds in darkness. Sleepy figures quietly rise from narrow beds. There is no rushing, no frantic scrambling. Everything follows habit, the same movement, the same prayers, the same silence. Day after day, year after year, some modern visitors might find a routine impossibly repetitive. Others might secretly find it wonderfully calming. There is comfort in knowing exactly what comes next. The dormitory is surprisingly plain. Rows of simple wooden beds, a blanket, perhaps a small chest for personal belongings. That is all. Comfort is not the goal. Neither is misery. The ideal lies somewhere in between. Enough to live well, not enough to become distracted. After prayers, the monks walk silently to the church. Imagine dozens of sandals softly brushing against worn stone floors. No conversation, only footsteps, candles flickering, morning light slowly growing brighter through stained glass. Silence becomes almost tangible, not awkward silence, comfortable silence, the kind that asks for nothing. Many monasteries follow the rule of Saint Benedict. Its famous phrase is wonderfully straightforward: pray and work. Two simple ideas, repeated throughout every day. Prayer, work, prayer again, work again. There's something almost musical about the rhythm. Once morning prayers conclude, breakfast remains modest. Bread, perhaps cheese, sometimes porridge, occasionally fruit. No elaborate feast appears. Meals are intended to sustain the body rather than entertain it. During breakfast, one monk often reads aloud. Imagine eating while someone calmly reads scripture or the writings of early Christian scholars. Conversation waits until later. Listening becomes part of the meal itself. The reading voice echoes gently across the dining hall. Nobody interrupts. Nobody checks a phone. Mostly because phones remain gloriously 800 years in the future. After breakfast, the monastery quietly comes alive. Some monks head toward the gardens. Others walk into workshops. Some disappear into the library. Each person has responsibilities. Each task matters. Let's begin in the gardens. Raised beds overflow with useful plants. Sage, rosemary, mint, thyme, lavender, chamomile. Medicinal herbs grow beside vegetables. The monastery often serves as the nearest medical center for miles around. Knowledge of healing plants passes carefully from one generation of monks to the next. Modern medicine has advanced enormously. Still, many herbs growing here remain familiar in kitchens and gardens today. The gardener moves patiently between rows, pulling weeds, checking leaves, watering young plants. He knows exactly which herbs soothe the cough, which ease stomach pain, which should absolutely never be confused with something else. That last category is particularly important. Nearby, the orchard stretched quietly across gentle hills. Apple trees, pear trees, plum trees. Bees drift lazily from blossom to blossom. The monastery keeps several hives. Honey is precious. It sweetens food, preserves fruit, creates candles, even appears in medicine. Bees may be tiny, but medieval communities owe them an astonishing amount. Now let's quietly enter one of history's most remarkable rooms, the scriptorium. At first glance, it seems almost disappointingly ordinary. Wooden desks, high windows, shelves, ink pots, parchment. Then you notice the silence. Each monk bends carefully over a manuscript, feather quill in hand, every letter formed with extraordinary patience. No printing presses exist. Every book begins here, one careful line at a time. A single mistake requires delicate correction. One spilled ink pot could ruin weeks of work. The concentration is remarkable. Hours pass. Scratch, scratch, scratch. The gentle sound of quills across parchment becomes the room's quiet heartbeat. Some monks copy the Bible. Others preserve Roman histories, ancient philosophy, mathematics, medicine, poetry, without realizing it. Many are saving knowledge that might otherwise disappear forever. Empires collapse. Kings come and go. Wars reshape borders. Meanwhile, someone quietly copies Aristotle. History often celebrates generals. Perhaps it should spend a little more time thanking librarians. The manuscripts themselves are beautiful. Large decorated letters bloom into colorful vines. Tiny birds perch among painted flowers. Gold leaf catches sunlight. Some margins contain surprisingly humorous little drawings. Snails fighting knights. Monkeys playing musical instruments. Rabbits chasing hunters. Apparently, even medieval scribes occasionally needed something amusing to draw after copying page 412. Understandable. After several hours, almost anyone would be tempted to sketch an unusually determined rabbit. The monastery library slowly grows. Shelf by shelf, book by book. To modern readers, it seems tiny, perhaps only a few hundred volumes. Yet each represents months, sometimes years, of labor. The library is priceless, not because of expensive materials, because of human time. There is perhaps nothing more valuable. Outside, once again, another group of monks works in the brewery. Yes, the monastery brews beer, quite a lot of it. This surprises many modern people. It shouldn't. Brewing creates safer drinking water, provides nutrition, supports travelers, generates income. Monastic breweries become famous throughout Europe for good reason. The process requires skill, grain, water, yeast, patience. Perhaps history has always been quietly powered by people patiently waiting for fermentation to finish. The smell inside the brewery is warm and comforting. Malted grain, fresh bread, with smoke. Everything feels wonderfully earthy. No stainless steel tanks. No electronic thermometers. Just experience carefully passed from one brewer to another. By midday, another bell rings. Work pauses. Everyone returns for prayer. The entire day gently breathes in, then out. Prayer, work, prayer, work. Nothing feels rushed. Nothing feels wasted. Even silence is purpose. Lunch resembles breakfast. Simple, nutritious, seasonal. Fish appears often. Many monasteries avoid meat from four-legged animals on certain days. Fortunately, medieval cooks become remarkably creative with fish. And if fish is unavailable, well, there is always more bread. Bread remains history's most dependable supporting character. After the meal, a short period of quiet reflection follows. Some monks read. Some walk slowly through the cloister. The cloister is perhaps the most peaceful place in the monastery. A covered walkway surrounding a small garden. Stone arches frame patches of blue sky. A fountain quietly bubbles in the center. Footsteps echo softly beneath the roof. It is impossible to hurry here. The architecture almost persuades people to slow down. Perhaps that was always the point. As afternoon sunlight warms the old stone, work begins once again. And so another ordinary day unfolds within these quiet walls. No grand battles. No royal ceremonies. No dramatic speeches. Just steady hands preserving books. Growing food. Brewing ale. Welcoming strangers. And quietly keeping knowledge alive while the wider medieval world continues beyond the monastery gates. Tomorrow, the bells will ring again. The gardens will need tending. The manuscripts will wait patiently on their desks. The bees will continue gathering nectar without the slightest interest in politics. And somewhere in the scriptorium, a monk will carefully finish one sentence before beginning the next. One line at a time. One page at a time. One peaceful day at a time. The monastery bells grow quiet behind us. The castle settles into another orderly evening. The village has drifted off to sleep beneath a blanket of stars. For a little while, it almost feels as though nothing changes. The same fields, the same cottages, the same familiar faces, the same rooster, who remains entirely convinced that the sun will forget to rise without his enthusiastic assistance. And yet, everything changes. Not all at once, not dramatically, but patiently. Because in the medieval world, the true ruler of every village was neither a king nor a lord. It was the calendar. More specifically, the seasons, unlike modern life, where strawberries somehow appear in winter and people can order almost anything with few taps on a screen. Medieval Europe followed nature with remarkable obedience. If the season changed, life changed with it. Let's begin in spring. Winter slowly loosens its grip. Snow retreats from the hills. Streams begin flowing again. The fields, brown and quiet for months, show tiny hints of green. For villagers, This is one of the happiest sights imaginable, not because spring is especially romantic, although poets certainly tried to convince everyone it was, but because green means possibility. Green means food. Green means another chance. The entire village seems awake at once. Plows come out of storage. Oxen return to the fields. Seeds carefully saved throughout winter are finally planted. Every handful matters. Nobody scatters seed carelessly. Each grain represents hope. It also represents considerable anxiety. Will the rains arrive? Will they arrive too early? Too late? Will frost return unexpectedly? Nature, as always, politely refuses to answer. The orchards burst into blossom. White flowers cover apple trees. Pear trees follow close behind. The air hums with bees. Children run beneath branches covered in petals. For a brief time, the countryside looks almost impossibly beautiful. Even people with endless work to do occasionally pause for a moment. Not long. The weeds are already growing, but perhaps long enough to notice. The monastery gardens come alive once more. Fresh herbs push through dark soil. Mint, sage, parsley, leeks. Everything seems eager to grow. The monks smile quietly. After months of dried vegetables and stored roots, fresh greens feel almost luxurious. The castle kitchens become noticeably brighter. Fresh eggs return in greater numbers. Milk becomes plentiful. Soft cheeses appear once again. The cooks look slightly less worried. Winter always tests everyone's planning. Spring rewards those who prepared well. Bird song fills every morning. Larks rise high above the fields. Swallows return from distant lands. Nobody fully understands where they disappear each winter. Several theories exist. Some are surprisingly imaginative. Medieval natural history occasionally takes wonderfully creative detours. One popular belief suggested certain birds spent winter sleeping underwater. An interesting hypothesis. The birds wisely decline to comment. As spring matures, lambs appear across the countryside. Tiny calves wobble uncertainly beside their mothers. Piglets explore absolutely everything. Goats continue behaving exactly like goats. Some personalities remain wonderfully consistent regardless of season. The days grow longer. People work later into the evening, not because someone changed office hours, simply because sunlight generously allows it. The entire village feels busier. There's an urgency in spring. Every task delayed now may become a problem months later. Nature waits for no one. Soon, spring quietly becomes summer. The fields transform into seas of green. Grain sways gently beneath warm breezes. Wildflowers cover meadows. Butterflies drift lazily from blossom to blossom. The mornings arrive earlier. The evenings linger longer. Children spend more time outdoors. Shoes are often abandoned whenever possible. Medieval children, much like modern ones, possess a remarkable ability to discover puddles regardless of weather conditions. Summer brings abundance. Fresh vegetables fill gardens. Peas, beans, cabbages, onions, herbs. Everything seems to grow faster than anyone can quite manage. The women spend long hours preserving food, drying herbs, making cheese, preparing fruit. Nothing can be wasted. Today's extra cabbage may become tomorrow's winter supper. The forests become generous as well. Berries ripen. Strawberries hide beneath leaves. Blackberries creep along hedgerows. Hazelnuts slowly begin forming. Children know every secret place where the best berries grow. They are considerably less enthusiastic about revealing these locations to adults. Perfectly understandable. Summer also brings weddings. Travel becomes easier. Roads are drier. Days are longer. Families gather. Church bells ring happily. Feasts appear. Music echoes across village greens. People dance. Not because life has suddenly become easy. Simply because joy deserves occasional celebration, even in difficult times. Especially in difficult times. The Lord's hunting parties venture into nearby forests. Falcons circle gracefully overhead. Hounds eagerly follow scent invisible to human noses. Hunting provides meat, but it also reinforces status. Certain forests belong to the Lord alone. The rules surrounding hunting can become surprisingly complicated. History has always possessed a talent for making straightforward activities remarkably bureaucratic. At the monastery, the bees work tirelessly. The hives buzz from dawn until dusk. Honey slowly fills wooden combs. The monks harvest it carefully. Every drop is precious. Candle for winter. Medicine. Sweetness in a world where sugar remains astonishingly rare. Honey quietly solves many problems. Then, almost without anyone noticing, summer begins to soften. The evenings become cooler. The first leaves quietly change color. A few birds gather into larger flocks. The harvest approaches. Now autumn arrives. This is the busiest season of all. Every available hand works. Children, grandparents, neighbors, everyone. Fields of wheat become golden. Barley bends beneath heavy heads of grain. Oats wait patiently. The harvest cannot be delayed. Rain might arrive tomorrow, or today. Nobody knows. Scythes move steadily through the fields. Bundles of grain stand drying. Carts creak beneath enormous loads. Dust fills the warm afternoon air. It is exhausting work, but there is also quiet satisfaction. Months of labor finally become visible. If the harvest is good, winter becomes manageable. If it is poor, everyone notices. Immediately, harvest festivals follow. Church bells ring. Tables become fuller than usual. Fresh bread appears. Ale flows generously. Music returns. Stories are shared. People laugh a little louder. Not because life has suddenly become perfect, because relief deserves celebration. The barns slowly fill. Hay is stacked carefully. Grain disappears into storage. Apples are gathered. Pears are picked. Nuts are collected. Firewood becomes increasingly important. Every log split today means greater comfort months from now. Even the castle grows busier. Accounts are checked. Taxes collected. Storehouses inspected. The steward quietly calculates whether supplies will last until spring. Good organization now prevents desperate decisions later. As autumn deepens, forests become extraordinary. Gold, amber, deep red, brown. Leaves drift gently across winding paths. Morning fog lingers longer. Smoke from cottage chimneys rises straight into cool air. There is a peaceful sadness to autumn. Beautiful, gentle, temporary. Eventually, the first frost arrives. Grass sparkles beneath early sunlight. Puddles freeze overnight. Breath becomes visible. Winter has quietly returned. The fields fall silent. Work changes once again. Instead of planting, people repair. Tools are sharpened. Roofs patched. Clothing mended. Firewood stacked. Inside cottages, spinning wheels begin turning for longer hours. What becomes warm blankets. Warm blankets become treasured possessions. Darkness arrives early. Candles become precious. Families gather close to the fire. Stories return. Songs return. Grandparents remember winters from decades earlier. Children imagine impossible adventures beyond snowy fields. Outside, wolves occasionally howl in distant forests. Most villagers never see them. They simply hear reminders that the wilderness still exists beyond warm hearths. The monastery grows even quieter. The library becomes especially busy. Winter is perfect for copying books. The gardens sleep beneath frost. But the manuscripts continue growing, one page after another. Inside the castle, great fires burn continuously. Even so, the stone walls remain stubbornly cold. Servants carry endless bundles of wood. Dogs curl beside fireplaces. Cats discover the warmest corner in every room with astonishing efficiency. Snow sometimes blankets the countryside. Roads become difficult. Travel slows. The world feels smaller. The village turns inward. Neighbors help one another. Meals are shared. Tools borrowed. Small kindnesses become especially valuable during the coldest months. And then, almost before anyone realizes, the days begin growing slightly longer again, only by a few minutes. Almost impossible to notice, except people do notice, very carefully, because after living so closely with nature, tiny changes matter. A little more daylight, a slightly warmer breeze, one bird singing a week earlier than expected. These are not small things. They are promises. Another spring is coming, another planting season, another harvest, another year. For medieval people, life was rarely measured by birthdays or calendars hanging on walls. It was measured by blossoms, harvests, snowfall, church festivals, the return of swallows, the ripening of apples, the first frost. Time itself lived in the fields, and as another peaceful year slowly turned beneath the same ancient stars, the familiar rhythm of medieval life quietly began all over again. Another winter quietly slips away. The first green shoots return to the fields. The smoke rises once more from village chimneys. The familiar routine begins again. But if we've learned anything during our peaceful walk through the Middle Ages, it's this. Daily life was wonderfully predictable until it wasn't. Not because of wars. Not because dragons suddenly appeared over the horizon. Sadly for medieval storytellers, dragon sightings remained disappointingly rare. Instead, ordinary life was gently interrupted by something much more important. Festivals, holy days, feast days, the moments when an entire village collectively decided that perhaps today the wheat could wait until tomorrow. That alone made the day feel extraordinary. To modern people, weekends seem perfectly normal. Most of us expect regular days away from work. The medieval calendar worked differently. There were countless religious feast days spread throughout the year. Christmas, Easter, Pentecost, the feasts of local saints, harvest celebrations, patron festivals. Some historians estimate that in many parts of medieval Europe, dozens, sometimes well over 100, days each year had religious significance of one kind or another, though exactly how much work stopped depended on the place and the period. Life remained demanding, but the calendar still made room for celebration, and people welcomed those moments with genuine enthusiasm. The village church stood at the center of it all, not only spiritually, practically. The church was where people gathered, shared news, celebrated marriages, mourned losses, settled disagreements, and, every so often, transformed an ordinary morning into something memorable. The church bells sounded different on feast days, longer, more joyful. The sound rolled across fields and forests. Even people already awake smiled quietly. Nobody needed to ask what day it was. The bells had already answered. Children naturally became excited first. They understood something wonderfully simple. Festivals usually meant better food. Children across history have demonstrated remarkable consistency in identifying important details. Inside cottages, preparations began early. The good clothing came out. Notice the good clothing, not dozens of carefully organized outfits. Usually one, perhaps carefully repaired many times. Perhaps worn only a handful of days each year. A freshly washed linen shirt, a cleaner wool tunic, a brightly colored ribbon. Simple things, yet they transformed the entire mood. Even shoes received extra attention, though muddy roads occasionally had rather different opinions. The women baked special breads, sometimes sweetened with precious honey, sometimes flavored with spices of fortune had smiled especially kindly that year. Butter appeared more generously. Cheese was served proudly. Ale flowed a little more freely than usual. Nobody was pretending every feast resembled a royal banquet. It didn't. But compared with ordinary days, it felt wonderfully abundant. The village slowly filled with laughter. Neighbors visited one another without needing practical reasons. Conversations wandered happily from one subject to another. Children played games in open fields. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else produced a pipe. Within minutes, music drifted gently through the air. No tickets, no stage lighting. Just people enjoying each other's company. There is something quietly comforting about entertainment that requires nothing more than willing participants. Dancing followed naturally. Circle dances, simple steps, hands joined together. Nobody seemed terribly concerned with perfection. The point wasn't performance. The point was belonging. Even those who claimed they couldn't dance somehow found themselves smiling before the afternoon ended. Perhaps history has always gently encouraged reluctant dancers. Food became the heart of every celebration. Large pots simmered over open fires. Fresh loaves disappeared astonishingly quickly. Roasted chickens occasionally appeared for particularly important occasions. Pies emerged from ovens carrying vegetables, meat, or fruit, depending upon the season. Children wandered hopefully between tables, quietly calculating which generous adult might offer another piece of bread. Experienced grandmothers usually notice first. Experienced grandmothers have always noticed everything. One elderly villager begins telling stories, not formal speeches, just familiar tales everyone has heard before. Stories about local saints. Stories about unusually clever foxes. Stories explaining why that crooked oak tree at the edge of the forest should never be cut down. Whether entirely true hardly matters. Traditions survive because people enjoy telling them. Nearby, the village musicians continue playing. A harp, a rebec, a small drum, perhaps wooden flutes. The melodies are simple enough that almost everyone recognizes them. Some songs have probably existed for generations. No one knows who first composed them. No one really asks. Certain songs belong to everyone. Games occupy much of the afternoon. Children race one another across grassy fields. Young men test their strength with friendly wrestling matches. Archery contests sometimes appear where local customs allow. Older villagers cheer enthusiastically, then quietly insist that everything was somehow better when they were young. Some traditions appear absolutely timeless. Traveling entertainers occasionally arrive during larger festivals. A juggler balances wooden balls with impressive confidence. A storyteller performs heroic tales. A puppeteer entertains children using carved wooden figures. The audience laughs politely, not uproariously. Remember, this is still our sleepy medieval evening. Even excitement proceeds at a comfortable pace. The merchant who visited during market day has returned as well. Business never entirely disappears. Bright ribbons, small mirrors, colorful beads, tiny religious tokens. Parents carefully consider whether today's celebration might justify one modest purchase. Sometimes the answer is yes. A little wooden whistle, a painted spinning top, a ribbon dyed a cheerful blue. Small gifts often become treasured memories. Meanwhile, inside the church, candles burn steadily. The priest prepares for the day's service. The building gradually fills. Stone walls echo softly with footsteps. Families sit together. Children do their very best to remain perfectly still. Their success varies considerably. Parents throughout history have mastered the same gentle look that quietly says, "Please stay seated for just 5 more minutes." The look remains surprisingly effective. The service itself becomes a shared moment. Voices rise together in familiar prayers. Latin fills the air. Most villagers do not speak it in everyday life. Yet the words remain comforting through repetition. Faith here is not distant or abstract. It accompanies births, harvests, illness, marriage, death, every season of life. When the service concludes, everyone steps back into sunlight. The celebration continues. Now conversations become louder. People exchange blessings. Visitors greet relatives from neighboring villages. Children immediately return to running, exactly where adults wish they wouldn't. Somewhere, a dog successfully steals an unattended piece of bread. History has not preserved the dog's name. A terrible oversight. The local lord may even attend certain celebrations. Contrary to dramatic stories, interactions between nobles and villagers are not always tense. Ceremonial occasions often reinforce community. The Lord donates food, supports church repairs, listens to local concerns, perhaps sponsors games or music. The relationship remains unequal, certainly, but medieval society functions through countless everyday interactions rather than constant conflict. As afternoon slowly becomes evening, bonfires sometimes appear during seasonal festivals. Not enormous blazing spectacles. Simply warm gathering places. Families sit nearby. Children stare into glowing embers. Someone quietly begins another story. The flames crackle softly. Above them, stars emerge one by one. The Milky Way stretches overhead exactly as it did during every other night of the year. The difference lies below. Tonight, instead of returning immediately to chores, people linger. No one seems eager to hurry home. Tomorrow, the fields will still need tending. The cows will still expect milking. The bread will still require baking. The spinning wheel will still wait patiently. But tonight, for just a little while, the routine gently loosens its grip. Laughter drifts across the village green. Music fades into quiet conversation. Candles glow behind cottage windows. Children gradually grow sleepy despite insisting they're not tired at all. Eventually, parents smile knowingly. Every generation of parents has won that particular argument. The fire burns lower. Neighbors wish one another a peaceful night. The priest returns to the quiet church. The musicians carefully pack their instruments. The storyteller finishes one last tale. Doors close softly. The village settles into silence once more. Festivals were never merely interruptions to medieval life. They were reminders. Reminders that work mattered. But so did community. That harvests were important. But so were shared meals. That faith shaped the calendar. But friendship filled the spaces between its dates. And as the final church bell gently echoed across sleeping fields, another celebration became a cherished memory. Tomorrow, the rooster would once again resume his completely self-appointed duties. The bread would once again become the hero of breakfast, and the peaceful rhythm of medieval life would quietly continue. Morning arrives quietly once again. The last festival lantern has been put away. The churchyard is peaceful. The village green is empty except for a few curious chickens investigating crumbs left behind from yesterday's celebration. The musicians have continued on their way. The storyteller has packed his worn leather satchel. The merchant has counted his coins one last time. Life settles back into its familiar rhythm. But not everyone stays in one place. Most medieval people spent their entire lives within a few miles of where they were born. That statement is mostly true, but not entirely, because every day, somewhere along Europe's winding roads, people were walking, quietly, patiently, sometimes hopefully, sometimes reluctantly. Today, let's join them. The village disappears behind us as the morning mist slowly lifts from the fields. The road beneath our feet isn't really a road in the modern sense. There is no neat strip of pavement, no painted lines, no helpful signs announcing the next town in exactly 12 miles. Instead, there is a broad dirt track worn smooth by countless generations of travelers. Cart wheels have carved deep grooves into the earth. Horse hooves have packed the soil firm. Rain has created puddles that seem strangely permanent. In dry weather, the road becomes dusty. Every passing cart leaves a pale cloud drifting lazily into the air. In wet weather, well, everyone quietly accepts that mud has temporarily become a way of life. Shoes grow heavier with every step. Wagon wheels sink into soft ground. Progress becomes less about speed and more about determination. The medieval road possesses its own personality. Some days it is friendly. Other days it behaves like a particularly stubborn mule. The countryside stretches peacefully around us. Fields of barley ripple in the breeze. Small patches of woodland provide welcome shade. Wildflowers bloom beside hedgerows. The air smells of damp earth, fresh grass, and distant with smoke. Birds accompany us almost constantly. Larks sing high overhead. Finches dart between bushes. Occasionally a hawk circles patiently above open meadows, searching for breakfast with considerably more focus than our village rooster ever demonstrated. Travel is rarely hurried. Most people walk. 5 miles an hour would be impressive. 3 is far more realistic. Nobody expects to reach distant towns before lunch. Journeys are measured in days rather than hours. Oddly enough, this changes how people think about distance. A place 30 miles away feels wonderfully remote. A kingdom 200 miles away may as well belong to another world. Yet people still travel. Merchants travel because trade never sleeps for long. Pilgrims travel because faith sometimes asks people to leave familiar places behind. Messengers travel because kings have an endless talent for sending letters. Students travel toward great universities. Craftsmen seek work. Young apprentices search for masters willing to teach them. Life occasionally nudges people beyond the horizon. We soon catch up with a merchant and his small wagon. 2 sturdy horses pull it steadily forward. The wagon is covered with thick cloth to protect valuable goods from rain. Inside are neatly packed bundles of wool, Folded linen, iron tools, cooking pots, and a few small luxuries. Tiny mirrors, colored ribbons, beads made from glass, needles, salt, items that seem wonderfully ordinary today, but represented genuine excitement in a quiet medieval village. The merchant smiles politely. Travel encourages conversation. The road becomes shorter when stories are shared. He has crossed rivers, visited bustling market towns, spent nights inside monasteries, endured enough muddy roads to develop deeply personal opinions about weather. He has also learned one simple truth. Always pack one extra pair of dry socks if possible. History does not preserve this advice nearly often enough. Ahead of us, the road enters a forest. The sunlight changes immediately. Tall oaks and beeches create cool patches of shade. The air becomes quieter. Leaves rustle gently overhead. Somewhere, a woodpecker begins patiently tapping against a tree. The forest feels ancient, not frightening, simply old. Many medieval forests supplied timber, firewood, mushrooms, berries, and game. They were working landscapes as much as wild places. Still, they also inspired countless legends. Every village seemed to know a particular tree where strange lights had once been seen, or a stream where fairies supposedly danced beneath the moon, or a ruined stone where someone claimed a wandering saint had rested centuries before. Whether anyone truly believed every story is difficult to know, but they certainly enjoyed telling them. The road winds between enormous trunks. Occasionally, sunlight breaks through the canopy in golden beams. Dust floats lazily in the light. It is difficult not to slow down. The forest quietly encourages patience. Eventually, we hear another sound. Running water. A small bridge crosses a clear stream. The bridge is simple. Wooden planks supported by sturdy beams. Travelers pause here almost automatically. Horses drink. People refill water flasks. Children throw tiny pebbles into the current. Someone sits beneath a willow tree for a few peaceful minutes before continuing. Bridges are important places. Without them, journeys become much longer. Building one requires remarkable effort. Maintaining one requires constant attention. Many monasteries, towns, and local lords take responsibility for nearby bridges because everyone benefits. Even kings discover that taxes become difficult to collect when nobody can cross the river. Beyond the bridge stands a roadside shrine. Only a small stone cross. A simple carving of a saint. Fresh flowers have been placed nearby, perhaps by a traveler grateful for safe passage. Perhaps by a local family remembering someone they loved. Travel and faith often walk side by side in the medieval world. A short prayer before continuing feels entirely natural. Around midday we reach an inn. Not every road has one. Many travelers sleep in monasteries or private homes. But busier routes gradually develop places where weary feet may rest. The inn is modest. Whitewashed walls, a thatch roof, a stable beside the main building. Smoke curls gently from the chimney. The smell drifting from the kitchen is impossible to ignore. Fresh bread, onion stew, a hint of rosemary. Someone inside is clearly having an excellent afternoon. The innkeeper greets newcomers warmly. He has heard stories from every corner. Someone inside is clearly having an excellent afternoon. The innkeeper greets newcomers warmly. He has heard stories from every corner of the kingdom. Merchants, pilgrims, knights, students, minstrels. If walls truly remember conversations, this little inn could probably fill several libraries. Inside, long wooden tables occupy most of the room. Travelers naturally gather together. Conversations begin almost immediately. Where are you headed? How are the roads? Has the bridge near the next village been repaired? Is the market in York especially busy this month? Did anyone actually see the new cathedral? Simple questions. Yet together they slowly stitch distant communities into one connected world. Lunch is wonderfully straightforward. A thick vegetable stew, fresh bread still warm from the oven, cheese, ale, perhaps smoked fish if the inn happens to lie near a river. Nobody complains. After several hours of walking, almost any warm meal tastes extraordinary. A wandering minstrel quietly tunes a small lute in the corner. Soon gentle music fills the room. Nothing elaborate, just familiar melodies that everyone seems to know. A few travelers hum along softly. Others simply listen while finishing their meals. Outside, the horses rest in shaded paddocks. They deserve the break. Medieval travel depends upon horses almost as much as people. War horses may receive dramatic attention in paintings. Pack horses quietly carried civilization. Grain, letters, books, wine, cloth, salt. Without them, trade slows almost to a stop. The blacksmith in the nearby village understands this perfectly. A healthy horse needs well-fitted shoes. The farrier's work is every bit as important as the knight's sword. Perhaps more so. A knight without a horse quickly becomes pedestrian, wearing remarkably expensive clothing. The afternoon sun begins to soften. Travelers gather their belongings. The merchant carefully secures his wagon. The pilgrim adjusts a worn walking staff. The minstrel thanks the innkeeper with one final tune. Journeys resume. The road continues gently over rolling hills. In the distance, another church tower rises above scattered cottages. The next village, the next meal, the next night's rest. For medieval travelers, life unfolds one stopping place at a time. No one is trying to set a speed record. No one checks arrival times every 5 minutes. The destination matters, but so does the journey itself. The changing sky, the conversations with strangers, the sound of cartwheels, the quiet companionship of fellow travelers who may never meet again after tomorrow. As evening approaches, the western sky glows with soft shades of amber and rose. Smoke rises from the next village. Dogs bark faintly in the distance. The church bell welcomes the end of another ordinary day. Our travelers arrive just before darkness settles across the fields. Boots are dusty, shoulders are tired, but spirits remain calm. Tomorrow, the road will continue beyond this village, past another stream, another forest, another monastery, another market square, because medieval Europe was never truly still. Even in its quietest corners, people were always moving, one careful step after another, one peaceful mile at a time. And under the same wide sky that watched over farmers, monks, kings, and shepherds alike, the old road patiently waited for tomorrow's footsteps. By the time our travelers leave the quiet country road behind, the afternoon sun has begun its slow descent. Ahead, the walls of a medieval town rise gently from the landscape, not as imposing as a great royal castle, not as peaceful as a sleepy farming village, something comfortably in between, a place where thousands of ordinary lives quietly overlap every single day. From a distance, the town almost seems to breathe. Smoke curls from dozens of chimneys. Church towers reach toward the fading sky. The walls, weathered by countless seasons, have watched generations arrive and depart. Stone has a remarkable memory, even when people forget. As we approach the gate, the pace of life changes almost without us noticing. More voices, more footsteps, more carts, a few horses, children darting through the crowd with astonishing confidence. Somehow they avoid every wheel, every basket, and every distracted adult. It is a skill perfected through constant practice. The town gate stands open. 2 guards lean comfortably against the heavy wooden doors. They recognize most local faces immediately. Strangers receive curious glances, polite questions, and perhaps a request about their business. Not because everyone is suspicious, simply because towns like knowing who has arrived. News often enters through the gate long before official messengers. A merchant from the coast may know about storms hundreds of miles away. A pilgrim might carry stories from distant shrines. A student returning from university brings new ideas wrapped inside an old cloak. Every traveler carries something beyond the contents of a satchel. Inside the walls, the streets become narrower. The buildings lean toward one another as though engaged in quiet conversation. Upper floors often extend slightly over the road below. Some streets become so narrow that neighbors could probably exchange bread through opposite windows without stepping outside. Quite convenient, though perhaps slightly awkward if one neighbor happened to be practicing the recorder. Fortunately, the recorder has not yet become everyone's favorite childhood instrument. Wooden signs hang above workshops. Most people cannot read fluently, so Pictures do the work instead. A boot marks the cobbler. A key identifies the locksmith. A loaf of bread proudly announces the baker. Simple, practical, wonderfully clear. The baker's oven is still warm. Fresh loaves continue to emerge one after another. The smell drifts lazily through the street. People slow, almost instinctively. Few scents have enjoyed such universal admiration across human history. Warm bread quietly improves almost any afternoon. The cobbler sits outside his workshop, enjoying the last good daylight. A worn leather boot rests across his knee. His hands move almost automatically. Thread, needle, pull tight. Another stitch. Boots rarely last forever. Fortunately, good cobblers have always possessed remarkable patience. Beside him, an apprentice watches carefully, perhaps 12 years old, maybe 13, old enough to learn, young enough to occasionally poke the wrong hole in expensive leather. Learning takes time. Every master was once an apprentice. Every expert once made mistakes. The medieval world understands this rather well. Farther along, we hear a steady rhythm. Tap, tap, tap. A cooper shapes wooden staves into a new barrel. Barrels quietly keep medieval Europe functioning. Wine travels inside them. Ale, salted fish, flour, honey, pickled vegetables, even gunpowder, centuries later. If someone invented a reliable container before the barrel, history has been strangely reluctant to celebrate it. The cooper certainly deserves more appreciation. Near the town square, several guild halls stand proudly. Guilds organize craftsmen, protect standards, train apprentices, support members during difficult times. Modern professional associations would recognize many familiar ideas, though perhaps with fewer ceremonial feasts. Or perhaps not. Human beings have always appreciated combining important meetings with good food. Inside one workshop, candles burn despite the remaining daylight. A goldsmith carefully engraves a silver cup. Every movement is deliberate. One slip could ruin days of labor. Nearby, a weaver guides thread through a loom with astonishing speed. The rhythmic clacking almost resembles quiet music. Cloth emerges inch by inch. Patiently, beautifully. It is strangely calming to watch someone become so completely absorbed in skilled work. The marketplace is quieter now than it was this morning. Most merchants have already packed away their goods. Only a few stalls remain open. An old woman sells apples from a basket. A fisherman offers the last of the day's catch. A flower seller gathers unsold bundles of herbs. Business slows naturally with the setting sun. Nobody expects customers late into the evening. Without electric lights, night gently encourages everyone to finish for the day. The town well remains busy. Buckets rise and fall. Water splashes softly against worn stone. Neighbors stop for conversation. A few children take considerably longer than necessary to complete what should have been a very simple errand. Their parents probably expected this. History strongly suggests children have always found creative ways to extend outdoor adventures. A bell rings from somewhere across the rooftops. Not urgently, simply marking another hour. The sound drifts through narrow streets before fading into the evening air. Church bells quietly organize urban life just as they do village life. Different places, same rhythm. Let's step inside the parish church. The interior feels wonderfully cool after the warmth outside. Colored light falls across ancient stone floors. Candles flicker beneath painted statues. A few people kneel quietly in prayer. Others simply rest for a few peaceful moments before returning home. Not every visit to church accompanies a great ceremony. Sometimes people simply seek a little stillness. The silence here feels comforting rather than empty. Outside again, evening slowly settles across the rooftops. Shopkeepers begin closing heavy wooden shutters. Iron bolts slide into place. Signs are brought indoors. Lanterns appear in a few windows. The town gradually changes character. The daytime bustle softens into something gentler. Now the taverns begin filling. Not rowdy chaos, just conversation. Travelers share tables with local craftsmen. Merchants compare prices from distant markets. A pair of university students politely debate a point of philosophy with considerably more enthusiasm than anyone else at the table. The innkeeper smiles patiently. He has witnessed hundreds of such discussions. They almost always end peacefully. Usually, the evening meal arrives. Stew, fresh bread, cheese, roasted onions, perhaps a little smoked pork. Simple food, comforting food. Exactly what tired travelers hope to find after a long day. A musician quietly tunes a rebec near the fireplace. Soon gentle melodies fill the room. Nobody claps loudly after each tune. That would seem rather unnecessary. Instead, people simply continue eating while the music becomes part of the evening itself. One elderly traveler begins telling stories about a cathedral under construction many miles away. Its towers rise a little higher every year. Its stained glass glows like jewels in morning sunlight. No one at the table has seen it. Yet, by the end of the story, everyone can almost imagine standing beneath those great arches. Stories have always been remarkable forms of travel. Outside, the town watch begins making its rounds. Lantern in hand, comfortable pace, watching for fire above all else. A single spark can become a catastrophe among tightly packed wooden buildings. Every household understands this. Fires are carefully tended. Candles extinguished before sleep. Buckets remain close at hand. The stars gradually appear overhead, only a few at first, then dozens, then hundreds. Even towns, busy as they are, still know darkness. The sky remains astonishingly bright compared with modern cities. Someone walking home pauses for a moment, looks upward, perhaps notices a familiar shape of the Great Bear, or Orion during winter months. Navigation, stories, faith. The stars quietly belong to all three. Behind shuttered windows, families gather around evening fires. Parents mend clothing. Children practice reading if fortunate enough to learn. Grandparents quietly tell stories they themselves heard as children. The day's work gently gives way to rest. Not perfect rest. Tomorrow's responsibilities already wait patiently. The baker will rise before dawn. The blacksmith will relight his forge. The cooper will finish another barrel. The apprentice will almost certainly make another small mistake and learn from it. Life moves steadily onward. The town itself slowly grows quiet. Not completely. Somewhere a baby cries. A dog answers another dog several streets away. A horse shifts comfortably inside a stable. A church bell marks the late hour. The sounds never disappear entirely. They simply become softer, like the final notes of a familiar song. As midnight approaches, nearly every window has gone dark. Only the monastery, the hospital, and perhaps one weary scholar copying another page by candlelight remain awake. The streets belong once again to moonlight and shadows. Tomorrow morning, the gates will open, merchants will arrive, bread will bake, church bells will ring. Children will chase each other through narrow lanes despite repeated instructions not to. And another perfectly ordinary day inside a medieval town will quietly begin. Because history was rarely made only in royal palaces. Most of it happened here, in workshops, in kitchens, at wells, around fireplaces, inside bakeries, across market squares. One peaceful evening at a time. Morning returns once again. The church bell echoes softly across the fields. A thin ribbon of smoke rises from every chimney. The familiar rooster confidently announces another day, still completely convinced that he is personally responsible for the sunrise. No one argues with him, mostly because everyone is far too busy. After wandering through villages, castles, monasteries, market squares, winding roads, and busy towns, let's spend a day somewhere even quieter. Somewhere history rarely pauses long enough to notice. Let's step inside an ordinary medieval home. Not the home of a king, not the chamber of a famous knight, just a family. Because, if we're being honest, this is where most of medieval history actually happened. Not in battles, not in royal councils, but beside a warm fire while someone stirred a pot of soup. The cottage is still small, perhaps only one large room with a loft above. Its walls are made of timber filled with woven branches and clay. The roof is thick with thatch, carefully repaired every year before winter arrives. It isn't luxurious. It isn't spacious. But it is home. And those are two very different things. The fire has already been lit. It never truly sleeps. Someone always protects a few glowing embers through the night. Starting a brand new fire every morning will be far too much work. Besides, fire is treated almost like another member of the household. Always present, always needed, always asking politely for more wood. The mother is already awake. In many medieval homes, she has been awake for quite some time. She kneads bread with practiced hands, measures nothing, yet somehow everything comes out exactly as it should. Experience is a remarkable cookbook. The smell of fresh dough slowly fills the room. Nearby, a pot hangs over fire. Today's breakfast looks pleasantly familiar. Porridge, a little cheese, dark bread, perhaps a few dried apples saved from autumn. Simple meals become comforting through repetition. The father steps outside. The morning air is cool. He pauses for just a moment before beginning another day's work. Not because he is avoiding responsibility, simply because the countryside at dawn deserves a few quiet seconds of appreciation. Mist hangs over nearby fields. Birds begin singing one by one. A horse shakes its mane inside the stable. The village slowly wakes together. Inside, the children are beginning to stir. One little boy rubs sleepy eyes while searching for his shoes. A younger sister has somehow managed to kick her blanket completely across the room during the night. Some childhood mysteries appear to be timeless. Breakfast is shared together whenever possible. No one rushes. There is nowhere to rush to. The fields will still be waiting after breakfast. The chickens certainly aren't going anywhere. Well, most of them aren't. One adventurous hen has already wandered into the garden. Again, she appears determined to inspect every cabbage personally. The family dog watches this development with professional concern. He has seen this routine before. Children laugh quietly, not loud enough to disturb the peaceful morning, just enough to remind everyone that homes are meant to contain happy sounds. After breakfast, the house becomes wonderfully busy. The father walks toward the fields carrying familiar tools. An older son proudly follows behind. Today, he will learn a little more about plowing, or repairing fences, or perhaps simply discovering that farming requires considerably more patience than he previously imagined. Learning happens by doing. Books remain rare. Teachers are often parents. Lessons happen every single day. Meanwhile, the mother begins another astonishing list of responsibilities. She washes yesterday's wooden bowls, feeds the chickens, checks the vegetable garden, turns cheese hanging to dry, repairs a torn sleeve, spins wool, prepares the midday meal, keeps one eye on the youngest child, and somehow still finds time to comfort someone who has scraped a knee chasing a goose. Running a medieval household requires the organizational skills of an experienced ship captain. Everything depends upon careful planning. Nothing can be wasted. Even tiny scraps of cloth become patches. Broken wooden spoons become firewood. Animal bones become useful tools. Old rope finds another purpose. Modern recycling would probably look at medieval households and quietly admit, "You were doing this long before I became fashionable." Near the window, grandmother sits with a basket of wool. Her hands move almost automatically. Twist, pull, spin, thread, slowly grows longer. She has repeated these movements thousands upon thousands of times. While working, she tells stories. Stories about difficult winters. Stories about harvest festivals from 50 years ago. Stories about relatives whose names survive only because someone keeps telling them. Children listen, sometimes carefully, sometimes while chasing each other around the room. Either way, the stories remain. Memory travels from one generation to the next without ever needing paper. Grandfather works nearby repairing a wooden rake. Age has slowed his walking, not his hands. Experience has taught him where wood naturally wishes to split, which trees make stronger handles, how tightly every peg should fit. Young people often provide strength. Older people quietly provide wisdom. Both matter. Outside, neighbors pass by. Nobody thinks twice about stopping for conversation. One woman borrows a little yeast. Another returns a cooking pot. Someone asks whether tomorrow's weather looks suitable for cutting hay. The answer depends largely upon whose grandfather is making the prediction. Every village seems to contain at least one elderly weather expert. His forecasts enjoy impressive confidence. Their accuracy occasionally varies. Around midday, everyone gathers again. The meal is modest: vegetable stew, fresh bread, perhaps onions roasted in the fire. Everyone eats thankfully. Food tastes especially good after several hours of honest work. Children immediately ask whether they may return outside. The answer arrives almost before the question has finished, after helping first. History suggests this sentence has been remarkably consistent for centuries. Afternoon brings quieter tasks. The youngest children play. Their toys are simple: a carved wooden horse, a cloth doll, smooth stones collected from a nearby stream. Imagination supplies everything else. Castles become sticks. Kings become neighbors. Dragons become particularly inconvenient goats. A child's world requires surprisingly few possessions. Nearby, two sisters learn embroidery. Their mother patiently demonstrates each stitch, not because perfection matters today, because one day these skills will help clothe an entire family. Knowledge quietly moves through generations in moments exactly like this. The father and older children return as the afternoon cools. Boots are muddy, hands are rough, shoulders are tired, yet there's quiet satisfaction in honest work completed. Tools are cleaned before being stored. Animals receive fresh feed. The cow is milked. The chickens finally agree to return to their coop. Well, most of them do. There's always one. There's always exactly one. Evening slowly fills the cottage. The fire burns brighter. The spinning wheel begins turning once again. Someone hums an old tune. No one remembers who first composed it. Perhaps no one ever did. It simply belongs to the village now. Dinner arrives, warmer than breakfast, perhaps flavored with herbs from the garden. The family eats together while discussing tomorrow. Will the weather remain fair? Should the fence near the meadow be repaired first? Has anyone remembered to gather more firewood? Ordinary conversations, the kind history books almost never record. Yet these conversations fill millions upon millions of evenings. After dinner, the work finally begins to slow. Not stop, simply slow. Father carves a small wooden whistle. It isn't expensive. It isn't elaborate. But when he quietly hands it to his youngest daughter, her smile briefly fills the entire room. Some gifts have never depended upon money, only kindness. Outside, darkness settles gently across the village. The stars begin appearing above the thatched roofs. Inside, grandmother tells one last story before bedtime. The children gradually become quieter. The dog curls beside the fire. The cat has already claimed the warmest corner in the house. Naturally, candles burn lower. One by one they are extinguished. The family offers a final prayer. Blankets are pulled close. The fire continues glowing softly through the night. Tomorrow, the same bread will bake. The same fields will wait. The same rooster will proudly announce another morning. And inside this little cottage, love, work, laughter, patience, and ordinary life will quietly continue. Because the true heart of the medieval world was never only found in castles or cathedrals. It lived here, inside small homes, around warm fires, where history was not written, but simply lived. The little cottage grows quiet. The last candle has gone out. Only the soft glow of the hearth remains. Outside, the wind gently brushes across the thatched roof. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls into the darkness. The family sleeps peacefully, resting before another familiar day. And as we watch the fire slowly settle into glowing embers, it's hard not to notice something that quietly connects every place we visited. The village, the castle, the monastery, the market, the town. Every one of them is filled with people at different stages of the same journey. Some are just learning to walk. Others are teaching their grandchildren how to bake bread. Life, like the seasons, keeps moving, never rushing, never stopping. So tonight, let's gently follow one ordinary medieval life from childhood to old age. Not a king, not a famous knight, just someone whose name history has forgotten, and yet whose life looked remarkably like millions of others. Our story begins with a child, perhaps a little boy, perhaps a little girl. The exact details matter lessen the rhythm of the years ahead. The child wakes each morning to the smell of smoke from a hearth, the same familiar bread, the same church bell, the same parents already busy with work. The world feels wonderfully small. A cottage, a garden, a few fields, a nearby stream. To a child, that is more than enough. The seasons become the first teachers. Spring means flowers. Summer means berries. Autumn means apples. Winter means stories beside the fire. Nobody explains time with calendars. Children simply learn it through nature. When the swallows return, spring has arrived. When the leaves fall, it is time to gather wood. When snow covers the fields, everyone stays closer to home. The world itself becomes a classroom. At first, work feels like a game. Collecting eggs, watching sheep, carrying tiny bundles of firewood, helping stir soup with a spoon almost as large as your arm. Every little task feels important, because it is. Parents rarely separate learning from living. Lessons happen while doing. A child watches carefully, then tries, then makes mistakes, then tries again. No ceremony announces the moment childhood begins to fade. It simply happens. One year, a boy follows his father to fields. The next year, he is trusted with his own tools. One year, a girl watches her mother spin wool. Soon afterward, her own hands begin turning the spindle. Responsibility arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. If the child lives in a town, life may follow a different path. Around the age of 12 or 13, an apprenticeship begins. The young apprentice leaves home. A difficult day for every family. The master craftsman becomes teacher, employer, and guide. Years pass. Leather is cut. Iron is shaped. Cloth is woven. Mistakes happen. Lessons are learned. Slowly, a skilled craftsperson begins to emerge. Patience becomes the greatest tool of all. If the child grows up in a monastery, another rhythm appears. Books replace plows. Prayers replace market days. Silence becomes a trusted companion. Hours pass copying manuscripts beneath quiet windows. Knowledge moves gently from one generation to the next. Different paths. The same purpose. Growing. As the years continue, friendship becomes increasingly important. Young people gather after church, meet during festivals, work beside one another in the fields, share songs, share laughter. Sometimes they begin noticing one particular person a little more often than everyone else. Courtship in the medieval world is usually simple. Long conversations while walking home, helping carry water, meeting at harvest celebrations, exchanging shy smiles across the village green. No grand orchestras, no elaborate fireworks, just quiet affection growing little by little. Eventually, wedding bells ring. The entire village gathers. Bread is baked. Ale is poured. Music fills the air. Families become one. A new household begins. Soon, there are children. Tiny footsteps once again echo across wooden floors. Life begins repeating its familiar pattern. Parents teach. Children learn. Grandparents smile knowingly. The wheel keeps turning. Middle age arrives almost unnoticed. The young apprentice has become the master. The shy bride now teaches her own daughter how to bake bread. The little boy chasing chickens now worries about repairing fences before winter. Responsibilities quietly multiply. There are roofs to mend, harvests to organize, taxes to pay, neighbors to help. Life becomes wonderfully ordinary, and perhaps that is its greatest gift. Not every day needs to become history. Some days simply need to become memories. The village itself changes slowly. A few new cottages appear. Children become adults. Old friends disappear. New babies are baptized. The church bell rings through every generation. Always familiar. Always steady. The seasons continue without asking permission. One spring blends gently into another. One harvest follows the last. Years pass almost like pages turning in a well-loved book. Eventually, gray hair begins appearing. Perhaps first at the temples. Perhaps after one particularly difficult winter. The hands remain steady, but not quite as quick. Heavy work now belongs to younger shoulders. The older generation finds different ways to help. Grandmother no longer spends long days carrying water. Instead, she teaches spinning. She tells stories. She watches the children while parents work. Grandfather sharpens tools, repairs chairs, carves wooden toys, offers advice that sounds suspiciously simple, yet somehow always proves correct. Experience speaks quietly. It never needs to raise its voice. Children gather eagerly around older relatives during long winter evenings. They ask endless questions. Was the great snowfall really that deep? Did wolves truly come so close to the village? Did grandfather really walk all the way to the great market town? The answers become stories. The stories become family history. No books record these moments. They survive because someone keeps telling them. Old age in the medieval world is not always easy. The body grows tired. Eyes become weaker. Cold winters feel colder than they once did. But age also brings something precious. Respect. In many communities, older people become living libraries. They remember which herbs helped during illness, which fields flooded after heavy rain, which families had long-standing friendships. Memory itself becomes a gift. One evening, after supper, an elderly grandfather sits quietly outside his cottage. The sun is setting beyond familiar fields. Children laugh somewhere nearby. Smoke rises from neighboring homes. The same church bell that welcomed him as a newborn now marks another peaceful evening. He smiles softly. The village has changed, and yet it hasn't. The same paths remain. The same stars appear overhead. The same swallows return every spring. Life continues, not because any one person remains forever, but because each generation gently hands tomorrow to the next. Perhaps that is the quiet miracle of ordinary history. Kings leave castles. Empires rise and fall. Borders change. But families continue baking bread, teaching children, planting gardens, sharing stories, watching sunsets, century after century. And as darkness slowly settles over the village once more, another peaceful day comes to an end. Only one gentle evening remains in our journey. One final walk beneath the medieval sky. One last quiet sunset before we leave this world behind together. And that, well, my friend, we walked together for quite a long time. We have followed muddy roads before sunrise, shared simple meals beside warm hearths, visited castles that were far colder than anyone in the movies ever admits, sat quietly inside peaceful monasteries while patient hands copied books one careful letter at a time, browsed lively markets, listened to village musicians, watched children chase remarkably determined geese, crossed forests where sunlight filtered through ancient oaks, and stood beneath skies so full of stars that the darkness itself seemed to glow. For one final evening, let's simply walk. No destination, no hurry, just one last peaceful stroll through the medieval world. The sun is beginning its slow journey toward the horizon. Its light has softened into warm shades of gold and amber. Across the countryside, long shadows stretch over familiar fields. The wheat moves gently in the breeze. It almost looks like waves upon a quiet sea. A farmer pauses for just a moment. His day's work is finished. Tomorrow there will be more fences to repair, more grain to gather, more tools to sharpen. But not yet. For now, he simply watches the sunset. The oxen graze peacefully nearby. They seem just as content as they were yesterday, and the day before that. Animals have always possessed an admirable talent for living entirely in the present. Perhaps they understand something we occasionally forget. Not every moment needs to accomplish something. Some moments simply deserve to be noticed. The little village slowly comes into view. Nothing has changed, or perhaps everything has. The cottages are still gathered around the church. Smoke still rises gently from every chimney. Children are still laughing somewhere beyond the vegetable gardens. A dog is barking enthusiastically at something only dogs seem capable of understanding. The familiar rooster has finally fallen silent. Even he needs a little rest eventually. Women bring in the last baskets from the gardens. Fresh herbs, a few onions, beans, late apples. Tomorrow another meal will begin with these simple gifts. The baker removes one final batch of bread from the oven. The warm smell drifts lazily through the evening air. Someone walking home smiles without even realizing it. Fresh bread has quietly improved human evenings for thousands of years. The church bell rings. Slowly, softly, not calling anyone to hurry, only reminding the village that another peaceful day has reached its end. Families gather inside their homes, with crackles gently in fireplaces. Simple suppers are shared. Parents ask children about their day. Children answer with stories that somehow become longer each time they are told. Grandparents smile knowingly. They remember telling very similar stories many years before. Outside, stars begin appearing one by one, exactly as they have every night, exactly as they will tomorrow. Let's continue walking. Just beyond the fields, the castle stands quietly against the fading sky. Its great stone walls no longer seem imposing. Instead, they simply seem old, comfortably old. The drawbridge has been raised for the night. Guards stroll slowly along the walls, not searching for enemies, simply enjoying the cool evening air. Inside the great hall, candles flicker softly. The Lord has finished hearing petitions. The steward has closed his account books. Servants clear away the last wooden bowls from supper. The cook finally sits down after another impossibly busy day. Everyone, regardless of rank, grows tired when the sun goes down. That may be one of history's gentlest equalizers. Stone walls can separate people during the day. Night reminds everyone that tomorrow requires another sunrise. Farther along, the monastery rests beneath the evening sky. The gardens are quiet. The bees have returned to their hives. The last prayer of the day echoes softly through the chapel. In the scriptorium, one elderly monk carefully finishes a sentence he has been copying. He places a feather quill beside the ink, closes the manuscript, blows gently across the page, then smiles. One more page preserved. One more small piece of knowledge carried safely into the future. He never imagines that people living hundreds of years later might still read those words. History often survives because ordinary people quietly finish ordinary work. The road beyond the monastery stretches into the distance. We've walked this road before. Merchants once passed here with wagons full of cloth and salt. Pilgrims followed it toward distant shrines. Messengers hurried along carrying royal letters. Students walked toward universities filled with books. Today, the road is almost empty. Just one traveler walking home before darkness settles completely. His boots are dusty. His shoulders are tired. Yet he walks with an easy rhythm. He knows the road well. The road knows him. Some friendships require very few words. The market square is peaceful now. Only a few empty stalls remain. Tomorrow morning they will fill once again. Fresh vegetables, cheese, bread, cloth, iron tools, laughter, conversations, bargains that take much longer than anyone originally intended. Life will begin again, exactly as it always has, exactly as it always will. The medieval town slowly grows quiet. Shopkeepers close their shutters. Candles appear behind tiny windows. The cooper finishes one last barrel. The blacksmith lets the forge cool. The cobbler places tomorrow's boots neatly beside his workbench. An apprentice sweeps the floor before heading home. A cat quietly claims the warmest spot near the bakery oven. Some professions never truly lose to the cats. They simply learn to share. The moon rises. Silver light settles across rooftops, forests, rivers, and fields. The same moon shines upon castles, upon cottages, upon monasteries, upon lonely roads. It never seems to favor one over another. Kings, peasants, merchants, monks, children, grandparents. Everyone sleeps beneath the same sky. Perhaps that has always been true. Perhaps it always will be. As we stand here together for one last quiet moment, it becomes clear that the Middle Ages were never simply an age of kings, battles, and castles. Those stories matter, but they were only a tiny part of the picture. Most medieval lives were wonderfully ordinary. People woke before dawn, baked bread, carried water, raised children, planted gardens, helped neighbors, shared stories, watched seasons change, celebrated weddings, mourned loved ones, repaired broken fences, mended old clothing, prayed, laughed, worked, rested, and then did it all again the next morning. History often remembers extraordinary people, but civilization has always been built by ordinary ones. The unnamed baker who rose before sunrise, the shepherd who counted sheep beneath autumn skies, the monk who patiently copied another page, the grandmother who remembered old songs, the blacksmith who shaped iron into useful tools, the child who chased butterflies through a summer meadow. Most of their names have disappeared. Their lives have not. Their work still echoes around us. Every loaf of bread, every old church, every worn stone bridge, every ancient manuscript resting safely inside a library, every village path that became a road, every road that became a town. Their quiet lives became the foundation of everything that followed. Now, the fire has burned low. The stars fill the sky from one horizon to the other. The village has gone completely still. Only the gentle chirping of crickets remains. The rooster, for once, has absolutely nothing to say. Tomorrow morning, he will almost certainly make up for that. But tonight, even he sleeps. So, as our peaceful walk through the medieval world comes to an end, we'll leave it exactly as we found it. Quiet, gentle, unhurried. The fields will still be waiting for the sunrise. The church bell will ring again at dawn. The baker will need another loaf. The blacksmith will light another fire. The monastery bells will call another morning prayer. Children will laugh. Neighbors will wave. Seasons will turn. And somewhere beneath another golden sunrise, another perfectly ordinary medieval day will begin. Thank you for walking through these quiet centuries with me. Now, the village is asleep. The fire is fading. The night is calm. And it's finally time for us to quietly make our way home.